I found pictures of my husband with my sister. When I confronted them, my sister sneered, "Maybe I was tired of living in your shadow." My parents sided with them. "Be the bigger person," Mom said. Now they're begging for. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. For 20 years, my life was a picture postcard of the American dream. My name is Carol, and I lived in a lovely two-story colonial in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind with manicured lawns and kids riding their bikes down the street until the fireflies came out. It was my sanctuary. My husband, Richard, or Rick, as everyone called him, and I had built a life there. We had our daughter, Heather, who at 15 was navigating the dramatic highs and lows of high school with a mix of teenage angst and incredible sweetness. Our house was a home. It smelled of fresh laundry and whatever I was baking that day, usually chocolate chip cookies, Heather's favorite. On Sundays, the aroma of a slow-roasting chicken would fill every room. It was a place of comfort, of stability. Rick was a financial advisor, a solid, dependable man, or so I thought. He was the kind of husband who always remembered my birthday, who'd bring me flowers for no reason, who'd sit with me on the porch swing in the evenings, just holding my hand while we watched the sunset. We were a team. We were the couple all our friends looked up to. "You and Rick," they'd say, "you guys are the real deal." And at the center of my world, aside from my daughter, was my sister, Susan. She was 2 years younger than me, but she was more than a sister. She was my other half, my confidant, my best friend. We had that uncanny sibling connection where we could finish each other's sentences. She lived just 10 minutes away, and not a day went by that we didn't talk on the phone or exchange a flurry of texts. When I had a tough week at my part-time job at the local library, Susan was the one I'd call to vent. When she was having trouble with a guy she was dating, my house was her safe haven. I remember one winter, a few years back, I came down with a terrible case of pneumonia. I was completely laid up for 2 weeks. Rick had to work, and Heather was just a little girl. Susan dropped everything. She moved into our guest room, cooked every meal, took care of Heather, and sat by my bedside, making me drink tea and telling me silly stories to keep my spirits up. She was my rock. My absolute, unshakable rock. I loved her with every fiber of my being, and I trusted her more than anyone on the planet. Our parents, who lived in the next town over, always beamed with pride at our closeness. "It's so wonderful," my mother would say, "that you two have each other." That was my life. Predictable, maybe. A little boring, perhaps. But it was mine, and it was beautiful. It was a life built on a foundation I thought was made of solid granite, the love of my husband, the joy of my daughter, and the unbreakable bond with my sister. I had no idea that foundation was actually made of sand, and a tidal wave was about to wash it all away. It all started so subtly, with little things that felt wrong but were easy to dismiss. Life is busy, right? People get stressed. Routines change. That's what I told myself. It began about a year ago. Rick started working late more often. It wasn't every night, but it went from a rare occurrence to a weekly one. "Big project at work," he'd say, sighing as he dropped his briefcase by the door. "We're trying to land a huge new client." I'd rub his shoulders and tell him not to work too hard. I was proud of his work ethic. I never questioned it. Then his phone habits changed. It was always on silent, and he'd always place it face down on the nightstand. If it buzzed while we were watching TV, he'd glance at it quickly and put it away. "Just a work email," he'd mumble. I remember feeling a tiny prickle of unease once or twice, but I'd immediately feel guilty. This was Rick. My Rick. I wasn't going to become one of those paranoid wives who checked her husband's phone. I trusted him. Around the same time, Susan started acting distant. Our daily phone calls became less frequent. When I'd call her, she'd often let it go to voicemail. When she did answer, her voice was strained, hurried. "Hey, can I call you back?" "I'm right in the middle of something," became her new catchphrase. I was worried about her. I thought maybe she was depressed or having financial troubles she was too proud to talk about. I tried to press her on it one afternoon when I stopped by her apartment. "Is everything okay, Susie?" I asked, sitting on her sofa. "You seem a million miles away lately." She wouldn't look me in the eye. She just kept tidying up some papers on her coffee table. "I'm fine, Carol. Just swamped at work. It's been crazy." I tried to believe her. I really did. I told myself I was being oversensitive. But the feeling that something was off wouldn't go away. It was like a low-grade hum in the back of my mind, a constant, quiet static that was disrupting the peaceful music of my life. The real alarm bell, the one I couldn't ignore, rang one Tuesday evening. Rick was working late again. I was making dinner, and I decided to call Susan to see if she and I could finally have that girls' night we'd been postponing for weeks. She answered on the second ring, her voice a little breathless. "Hello?" "Hey, it's me," I said, stirring a pot of marinara sauce. "Just calling to see what you're up to." "Oh. Hey," she said. And then, in the background, I heard a man's voice. It was faint, but it was unmistakable. It was Rick's laugh. That deep, rumbling laugh I knew as well as my own heartbeat. My hand froze over the stove. The entire kitchen seemed to go silent except for the bubbling of the sauce. "Susan, who is that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. There was a panicked silence on her end. Then, a shuffling sound. "Nobody," she said, her voice suddenly high-pitched. "It's just the TV. Look, I've gotta go, something's burning on the stove. I'll call you tomorrow." And she hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, the wooden spoon still in my hand, dripping red sauce onto the clean floor. The TV? That wasn't the TV. I knew that laugh. I had fallen asleep to that laugh for 20 years. A cold, heavy dread began to spread through my chest. It was a terrifying feeling, like standing at the edge of a cliff in the dark, knowing you're about to fall but not being able to see the bottom. For the next few days, I lived in a fog of denial and sickening anxiety. I tried to function normally. I packed Heather's lunch, I went to work at the library, I smiled at my neighbors. But inside, I was screaming. Rick's laugh in the background of Susan's call replayed in my mind on a loop. I tried to come up with rational explanations. Maybe they were planning a surprise party for me? Maybe Rick had stopped by her place to help with a leaky faucet on his way home from work? Every excuse I came up with sounded flimsy and pathetic, even to me. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. Rick was out golfing with some clients. Heather was at a friend's house. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My hands were trembling as I tried to read a book, but the words just swam in front of my eyes. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I remembered the family iPad. We all used it, for recipes, for browsing the internet, for streaming movies. It was usually logged into all our accounts. My heart was pounding in my ears as I walked into the kitchen and picked it up from the counter. I sat down at the table, my hands clammy. I didn't even know what I was looking for. I just started opening apps. His email, his Facebook, nothing. It was all maddeningly normal. Then I saw it. A cloud storage app one didn't recognize. I tapped on it, not expecting it to open. But it did. And there, at the top of the file list, was a folder. A folder titled simply, Us. My breath caught in my throat. My finger hovered over the screen, shaking. Part of me, a very loud part, was screaming, "Close it, Carol. Just close it and walk away. You don't want to know. But I couldn't. I had to. I tapped the folder. It opened. And my world ended. It wasn't just a few pictures. It was hundreds. Pictures of them together. Rick and Susan. My husband and my sister. Pictures of them at a restaurant I'd never been to, smiling at each other over a candlelit dinner. Pictures of them on a hiking trail, his arm wrapped around her waist. Pictures of them, in a hotel room, tangled in white sheets, their faces flushed with a kind of intimacy that made me want to vomit. And then there were the messages. Screenshots of text conversations. Months and months of them. Rick, can't stop thinking about you. Susan, you either. Last night was incredible. Susan, are you sure Carol doesn't suspect anything? Rick, she has no idea. She trusts us both completely. That line. She trusts us both completely. It was like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs. The room started to spin. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling. I scrolled and scrolled, my vision blurring through tears. I saw pictures of them in my own backyard, kissing by the rose bushes I had planted with my own 2 hands. My husband and my sister, in my home, my sacred space, betraying me. It wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated, long-term desecration of my entire life. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring at the screen, a cold, hollow feeling spreading through me. The woman in the pictures with my husband wasn't a stranger. It was the woman who had held my hand when I gave birth to my daughter. The woman who had helped me plan my wedding. My baby sister. And the man kissing her was the man I had promised to love, honor, and cherish for the rest of my life. They had shattered everything. And the worst part? They had used my love and my trust for them as their cover. I sat at that kitchen table until the sun went down, the iPad lying face up in front of me like a tombstone. The house grew dark around me, but I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat there in the shadows, numb. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, hard anger that settled deep in my bones. It was a kind of rage I had never felt before, quiet, focused, and absolute. I heard his car pull into the driveway. The crunch of the tires on the gravel sounded unnaturally loud in the silence. I heard the garage door open and close, his keys jangling as he came in through the mudroom. "Carol? You home?" he called out, his voice cheerful. "Why are all the lights off?" He flipped the switch in the kitchen, and the sudden brightness made me flinch. He saw me then, sitting at the table, and his smile faltered. "Hey, what's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowing with fake concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," I said, my voice flat and empty. "2 of them." I turned the iPad around to face him. His eyes flickered to the screen. For a split second, I saw pure, unadulterated panic flash across his face. It was the look of a cornered animal. Then, just as quickly, the mask of denial slammed back into place. "What is this?" he blustered, trying to laugh it off. "Some kind of joke? What are you doing going through my things?" "Don't," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Don't you dare try to turn this on me, Rick. Don't you dare." He looked at the screen again, at the picture of him and Susan kissing, her hand tangled in his hair. The fight seemed to drain out of him. He sank into the chair opposite me, his face pale. "Carol, listen." He started, his voice pleading. "No," I cut him off. "You listen. For 20 years, I have been your wife. I have been your partner. I built this home with you. I raised our daughter with you. I trusted you. I loved you. And while I was doing all of that, you were doing this." I gestured to the iPad. "With my sister." "My sister, Rick." He just stared at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. I'm so sorry, he whispered. It was a mistake. It just happened. A mistake? I let out a harsh, broken laugh. A mistake is when you forget to take out the trash. A mistake is when you burn the toast. This, I said, my voice rising with every word, was a choice. Hundreds of choices. Every single day, you chose to lie to my face. Every time you kissed me goodnight, you were choosing to betray me. And with her. He finally looked up at me, his eyes full of pathetic, self-serving tears. I was lonely, he whimpered. You've been so distant lately, so wrapped up in Heather and the library, and Susan, she understood me. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The grief, the shock, the pain, it all crystallized into a single, sharp point of fury. Get out, I said, my voice calm again, but with an edge of steel he had never heard before. What? You heard me. Get your things. And get out of my house. Carol, be reasonable, he begged, reaching for my hand. I snatched it away like his touch was acid. We can talk about this. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. There is nothing to fix, I said, standing up. My whole body was trembling, but my resolve was absolute. You and I are done. You broke this. You and her. Now get out. I want you gone before Heather gets home. Go. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, finally realizing that the compliant, forgiving wife he thought he knew was gone forever. He saw the stranger I had become in the space of a few hours. Defeated, he stood up and walked upstairs. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of him opening drawers and rustling through the closet. A few minutes later, he came down with a single duffel bag. He paused at the door, his face a mess of regret. Carol. Goodbye, Rick, I said, without looking at him. I heard the door open, and then click shut. And I was alone in the wreckage of my life. After Rick left, I collapsed into a kitchen chair, my body shaking with a toxic cocktail of rage and grief. But I knew I wasn't done. There was one more demon I had to face. The worst one. I grabbed my car keys, my movements jerky and robotic. I drove the 10 minutes to Susan's apartment on autopilot, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I didn't know what I was going to say. I just knew I had to look her in the eye. I didn't bother buzzing. I had a key to her building, a key she had given me for emergencies. The irony was so bitter it tasted like bile in my mouth. I let myself in and walked down the hallway to her apartment, number 3B. I pounded on the door, not with my knuckles, but with the flat of my hand. It took a moment, then the door swung open. And there she was. My sister. She was in her pajamas, her hair messy. When she saw me, her face went from sleepy confusion to stark terror. Carol, she breathed, her eyes wide. What are you doing here? You know why I'm here, I said, pushing past her into the apartment. It was small and cozy, filled with pictures of us, of our family. A photo of the two of us at my wedding sat on her bookshelf, smiling, arm in arm. I wanted to smash it. He called you, didn't he? She whispered, closing the door behind me. Oh, he didn't have to, I said, turning to face her. I held up my phone, showing her one of the pictures from the iPad. A picture of her looking up at my husband with pure adoration. Her face crumpled. Carol, I am so sorry, she started to cry, the tears I knew she could turn on and off like a faucet. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear. You never wanted to hurt me? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. What did you think was going to happen, Susan? Did you think I'd just never find out? Did you think we'd all just go on playing happy families forever while you were sleeping with my husband behind my back? It wasn't like that, she sobbed. We fell in love. It was wrong, I know it was wrong, but I couldn't help it. He was so unhappy with you. The audacity of it, the sheer, unmitigated gall, sent a fresh wave of white-hot fury through me. Unhappy? I spat. You have no right to talk about his happiness. You have no right to anything. You stood beside me at my wedding. You held my daughter in the hospital when she was born. I trusted you with every secret, every fear, every joy I've ever had. And you took that trust and you systematically destroyed it. I took a step closer to her, my voice dropping to a menacing whisper. How could you? Of all the men in the world, you had to choose mine? You had to choose the father of your niece? You had to destroy my home? And then she said the words that would sever our bond forever. She stopped crying, and a hard, defiant look came over her face. Maybe I was tired of living in your shadow, she shot back, her voice sharp with resentment. It was always perfect Carol with her perfect husband and her perfect house. You have everything I ever wanted. Don't you think I deserve a little happiness? What do you have that I don't? Rick saw that. He saw me. He gave me the excitement and passion that you lost years ago. I just stared at her. I felt nothing. The pain, the love, the shared history, it all vanished. In her place stood a stranger, a venomous, jealous creature I didn't recognize. The sister I had loved was gone. She had been gone for a long, long time. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I just looked her dead in the eye. You are dead to me, I said, each word precise and cold. From this moment on, I don't have a sister. I turned around and walked out of her apartment, leaving her standing there amidst the ruins of our lives. I didn't look back. I got in my car, and as I drove away, I finally let myself break down, howling with a grief so profound it felt like a part of my soul had been ripped out. Driving home from Susan's, I felt like a ghost. The world outside my car window, the streetlights, the other cars, the houses with their warm, glowing windows, all seemed like part of a different reality. My reality was just a black hole of pain. When I got home, the house was dark and empty, and the silence was suffocating. I knew I couldn't be alone. I needed my mom. I needed my parents. They would be my port in this storm. They would hold me, they would tell me it was going to be okay, and they would be just as furious and heartbroken as I was. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. My mom answered on the second ring. Carol, honey, what's wrong? You sound awful. The dam broke. I started sobbing, huge, gulping sobs that made it hard to speak. Mom, I cried, it's Rick. And Susan. They're having an affair. There was a strange pause on the other end of the line. It wasn't the gasp of shock I was expecting. It was just silence. Mom? I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. Did you hear me? I heard you, dear, she said finally, her voice strangely calm. Listen, Carol, I think you need to take a deep breath. You're overreacting. I couldn't have heard her right. Overreacting? Mom, I found pictures. Hundreds of them. They've been doing this for months, behind my back. Well, she said, and her tone was one of weary patience, as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum. These things happen. Your father and we've known for a little while that things weren't perfect between you and Rick. The floor dropped out from under me. You knew? I whispered, the words getting stuck in my throat. You knew about this? We didn't know the specifics, she said quickly, defensively. Susan confided in me that she and Rick had grown close. That he was unhappy. We were hoping it would just blow over. I felt like I was going to be sick. My own mother. She knew. And now, she continued, her voice gaining strength, the worst thing you can do is make a scene and blow up the whole family. You have Heather to think about. Rick is a good man who made a mistake. And Susan is your sister. She loves you. You're the older sister, Carol. You need to be the bigger person here. You need to forgive them." At that moment, my dad got on the extension. "Your mother's right, sweetheart," he said, his voice laced with that familiar, patronizing tone he used when he thought I was being irrational. "Men make mistakes. It's in their nature. The important thing is keeping the family together. You don't want to throw away a 20-year marriage over a little fling. Be smart about this. Don't let your emotions get the best of you. We can't have this kind of scandal in our family." A scandal. That's what this was to them. Not a soul-crushing betrayal, not the destruction of their daughter's life, but an inconvenient scandal. They were more concerned with their reputation, with maintaining the facade of a perfect family, than with my shattered heart. They had chosen Susan. They had chosen to protect the perpetrator over comforting the victim. I couldn't breathe. The pain was so immense, so all-encompassing, it was physical. It was worse than Rick's betrayal. It was worse than Susan's. This was my mother and father. The two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And they had thrown me to the wolves to save face. "I have to go," I managed to choke out. "Carol, wait," my mother started. I hung up the phone. I slid down the kitchen wall until I was sitting on the cold linoleum floor, wrapping my arms around myself. I was completely, utterly alone. The last lifeboat I thought I had just sailed away, leaving me to drown. I spent that night on the kitchen floor. I didn't sleep. I just stared into the darkness, the words of my parents echoing in my head. Be the bigger person. Don't make a scene. Men make mistakes. With every passing hour, my grief began to burn away, leaving something else in its place, clarity. A cold, hard, crystalline clarity. They were all wrong. This wasn't a mistake. It was a conspiracy. My husband, my sister, and my parents, they had all participated, either through action or through complicit silence, in the systematic dismantling of my life. They saw me as a speed bump on the road to their own selfish desires and conveniences. They expected me to absorb the pain, to swallow the humiliation, and to quietly patch things up so their lives wouldn't be disrupted. They expected me to be a doormat. When the first gray light of dawn seeped through the kitchen window, I stood up. My body was stiff and sore, but my mind was sharp. I was done crying. I was done being a victim. I walked over to the junk drawer, pulled out the phone book, yes, a real, old-fashioned phone book, and looked up the number for the best divorce lawyer in town. I called his office at 8:01 a.m., as soon as they opened. I got an appointment for that afternoon. Then, I did something I never thought I would do. I went to my phone and opened my contacts. I scrolled to Mom. I stared at her name for a long moment, a lifetime of memories flashing before my eyes, her braiding my hair, her teaching me to bake, her holding me when I was sick. Then, I pressed block. I did the same for my dad. And then, with a final, decisive tap, I blocked Susan. A small, simple action, but it felt like a declaration of independence. It felt like taking my first breath of clean air after being trapped in a toxic room for years. When Heather came home from her friend's house later that morning, I sat her down at the kitchen table. It was the hardest conversation of my life. I told her the truth, gently but honestly. I told her that her dad and I were getting a divorce, and that he wouldn't be living with us anymore. I didn't tell her the details about Susan, she was only 15, and she didn't need that burden. I just said that her dad had done something that broke our family, and we couldn't fix it. Her eyes filled with tears, and I held her as she cried, my own heart breaking for her pain. But as I held her, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. My only job now was to protect this child, to create a safe and stable home for her, away from all the poison. That afternoon, I met with the lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davis. I told her everything, laying out the pictures, the texts, the whole sordid story. She listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When I was done, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Carol, they have underestimated you. We are not just going to file for divorce. We are going to make sure you and your daughter get everything you deserve. We will fight for full custody, for the house, and for a financial settlement that will secure your future. They wanted you to be quiet. We are going to be loud." Walking out of her office, I felt a strange sense of peace. The storm wasn't over. In fact, the hurricane was just making landfall. But for the first time in days, I wasn't afraid. I had a plan. I had an advocate. And I had myself. It was all I needed. The moment the divorce papers were served, the floodgates of hell opened. It was as if my single act of self-preservation had been interpreted as a declaration of war by the entire family. My decision to block my parents and Susan didn't stop them, it just made them more creative in their harassment. It started with the phone calls. They couldn't get through to my cell, so they started calling the house landline, a number I hadn't used in years but kept for emergencies. I'd let the answering machine pick up, and my mother's voice would fill the house, pleading, then angry, then crying. "Carol, how could you do this? You're tearing this family apart. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. You are being so selfish." I would stand in the kitchen, listening, my hands clenched into fists, until the machine cut her off. Then came the emails. Long, rambling manifestos from my father about family duty, loyalty, and my hysterical overreaction. He accused me of trying to ruin Rick's career and Susan's reputation. He wrote, "Your sister made one foolish choice, and you are willing to burn her at the stake for it. Is that the kind of person you want to be?" Susan sent emails too, but hers were different. They were a bizarre mix of feigned remorse and thinly veiled threats. "You're taking my niece away from me," she wrote. "You're turning Heather against her own family. You will regret this, Carol. You'll end up old and alone." But the worst was when they started showing up at the house. The first time, it was my mother. I was helping Heather with her algebra homework at the dining room table when the doorbell rang, long and insistent. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing there, her face pinched with anger. I didn't open the door. "Carol, I know you're in there," she yelled through the wood. "Open this door. We need to talk." Heather looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "Mom, what's going on?" "It's nothing, honey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just ignore it. She'll go away." She didn't. She rang the bell and banged on the door for a full 10 minutes before finally giving up. The sound echoed through the house, a physical assault on the fragile peace I was trying to build. A few days later, Rick showed up. He had the nerve to use his old key to let himself in. I was coming down the stairs and found him standing in my foyer, looking around as if he still owned the place. "You can't just walk in here, Rick," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "This is still my house too," he said smugly. "And we need to talk about your ridiculous legal demands." "Full custody? Are you insane? No judge will grant that." "Get out," I said, pointing to the door. "From now on, you will only communicate with me through my lawyer." He actually laughed. "Oh, Carol. Don't be so dramatic. We both know you'll come to your senses eventually." That was the last straw. The next day, on the advice of Ms. Davis, I had all the locks on the house changed. I also filed a formal letter with the police, documenting the harassment. It wouldn't lead to a restraining order yet, but it started a paper trail. I felt like I was living in a fortress under siege. Every ring of the doorbell, every car that slowed down on our street, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. They were trying to break me. They were trying to wear me down until I crawled back and accepted their twisted version of reality. But every time they pushed, it only hardened my resolve. They didn't realize they weren't dealing with the old Carol anymore. They had killed her. And the woman who was left was not going to back down. The months that followed were a blur of legal paperwork, tense phone calls from my lawyer, and a whole lot of quiet nights at home. The initial storm of harassment from my family eventually subsided into an angry silence when they realized their tactics weren't working. The silence was a relief, but it was also heavy, a constant reminder of the chasm that had opened up between me and the people I had once loved most. My focus became singular: Heather. I watched her like a hawk, terrified that the trauma of the divorce would leave permanent scars. I knew she was hurting. She was quieter than usual and spent more time in her room. I knew she missed her dad, the dad she thought she knew. So, I decided we needed a project, something to pull us out of the gloom and give us a sense of control over our lives again. "What do you think about us redecorating the living room?" I asked her one Saturday morning over pancakes. Her eyes lit up, just a little. "Really? Can we paint it?" "We can do whatever you want," I said. "It's our house. Let's make it ours." That day, we went to the hardware store. We spent an hour looking at paint swatches, laughing as we held them up and made faces. We settled on a warm, sunny yellow. The next weekend, we put on old clothes, blasted Taylor Swift from a portable speaker, and painted the entire room. We got paint in our hair and on our clothes. We were terrible at it, with uneven edges and a few drips on the floor, but we didn't care. As we rolled the final coat of yellow over the boring beige walls, it felt like we were literally painting over the past, covering up the memories of the life that had imploded in that very house. Slowly, we started building a new routine, a new life for just the two of us. We established Taco Tuesdays and Friday night movie marathons. I started attending her soccer games, cheering from the sidelines until my voice was hoarse. She started opening up to me again, telling me about school, about the boy she had a crush on, about her dreams for the future. We talked about creating a college fund for her, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt exciting, not terrifying. On the advice of a friend, I found a therapist. I started going once a week. At first, it was hard. I just sat there, unable to talk about the depth of the betrayal. But my therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Evans, was patient. She just let me sit in the silence until I was ready. And then, one day, it all came pouring out. I talked about Rick, about Susan, about my parents. I cried for the family I had lost, for the woman I used to be. And Dr. Evans helped me see that it was okay to grieve, but it was also okay to be angry. She helped me understand that their actions were a reflection of their own brokenness, not mine. One afternoon, Heather came home from school looking thoughtful. She sat down at the kitchen counter while I was unloading the dishwasher. "Mom," she said quietly, "I know things have been really hard. And I miss Dad sometimes. But I'm really proud of you. You're so much stronger than I ever thought." I stopped what I was doing, my hands still wet, and looked at my daughter. Her eyes were so clear and honest. Tears welled up in mine, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. In that moment, I knew we were going to be okay. We had lost so much, but we still had each other. And that was enough. We were slowly, painstakingly, building a new life from the ashes of the old one. Life had settled into a fragile, but peaceful, new normal. The legal battle with Rick was still dragging on, a tedious back and forth between our lawyers over assets and visitation schedules, but the daily emotional warfare had ceased. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Susan in nearly 6 months. Some days, it was a dull ache in my chest, other days, I felt nothing but relief. Heather was thriving in school, and I was beginning to feel like myself again. I even started a book club with some of the other women from the library. We were healing. Then, one Tuesday evening, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it. I had learned to be wary of calls I didn't recognize. but for some reason, I did. Hello? Is this Carol Peterson? A woman's voice asked, calm and professional. Yes, it is, I said, a flicker of apprehension running through me. Ma'am, my name is Nurse Johnson. I'm calling from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your father, Robert Miller, was admitted to the emergency room about an hour ago. He's had a severe heart attack. The world tilted on its axis. My father. A heart attack. The words didn't seem real. My dad was one of those men who seemed indestructible. He was always working in his garden or fixing something in the garage. He had never been seriously ill a day in his life. Is he okay? I stammered, gripping the kitchen counter for support. He's in critical condition, ma'am, the nurse said gently. The doctors are doing everything they can, but it's very serious. Your mother listed you as emergency contact. She asked if you could come to the hospital. My mother. She wanted me to come. After 6 months of silence, 6 months of being treated like an enemy, now they needed me. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me so powerfully it made me dizzy. There was the immediate, instinctual fear for my father, the little girl inside me who was terrified of losing her daddy. But there was also a cold, bitter anger. They had cast me out. They had told me I was destroying the family. And now, in their moment of crisis, they were calling me back. I'll be there, I heard myself say, the words coming out before I had even consciously decided. We're in the cardiac intensive care unit on the 3rd floor, the nurse said. Just ask for me at the front desk. I hung up the phone, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do? Walk into that hospital waiting room and face them all? Face my mother, who had chosen my cheating sister over me. Face Susan, who was probably there, playing the part of the devoted daughter. The thought made my stomach turn. I looked at the clock. Heather was at soccer practice, she wouldn't be home for another hour. I had to go. He was my father. Whatever he had done, whatever he had said, he was my father, and he might be dying. I grabbed my purse and my car keys, my hands shaking. As I walked out the door into the cool night air, I felt like I was walking into the eye of a hurricane I had only just escaped. The hospital was a maze of sterile white hallways and the smell of antiseptic. Every squeak of my shoes on the polished floor echoed the frantic beating of my heart. I found the cardiac ICU on the 3rd floor and hesitantly pushed open the double doors. The waiting room was small and stark, furnished with uncomfortable-looking plastic chairs. And there they were. My mother was slumped in a chair, her face gray and haggard. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the last 6 months. Her hair was unkempt, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Sitting next to her, holding her hand, was Susan. She looked up as I walked in, and her eyes widened in a mixture of shock and something that looked like guilt. The air in the room crackled with tension. It was the first time I had laid eyes on either of them since I walked out of Susan's apartment. I stopped just inside the doorway, my purse clutched in front of me like a shield. For a long moment, nobody spoke. We just stared at each other across the small room, a family torn apart, reunited by tragedy. My mother was the first one to move. She slowly stood up, her body looking frail and unsteady. Carol, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I just gave a curt nod, my eyes fixed on her. I refused to let them see me cry. I refused to look weak. How is he? I asked, my voice coming out colder and steadier than I felt. It's bad, my mother said, her voice cracking. The doctor said, the next few hours are critical. He had a major blockage. She took a shaky step towards me. Thank you for coming. I didn't know if you would. He's my father, I said simply, cutting off any potential for a sentimental moment. I glanced at Susan, who was still sitting in her chair, staring at the floor, refusing to meet my gaze. She looked miserable. Her usual polished appearance was gone. She looked tired and worn down. A small, vindictive part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction. A doctor came out then, a kind-looking man with weary eyes. "Mrs. Miller," he said, looking at my mother. We all turned to him, our family drama forgotten for a moment. "I'm Dr. Chin. Your husband is stable for now. We were able to place a stent, and he's responding, but he's not out of the woods. He's sleeping. You can see him, but only one at a time, for just a few minutes." My mother looked at me, then at Susan, her face a mask of indecision. "You should go first, Carol," she said quietly. Susan's head snapped up, a flash of her old resentment in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. I was surprised. But I didn't argue. I nodded at the doctor and followed him through another set of doors into the ICU. The room was filled with the quiet, rhythmic beeping of machines. And there, in the bed, was my dad. He looked so small and fragile, with tubes and wires connected to him. His face was ashen. Seeing him like that, all the anger I had been holding on to seemed to evaporate, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. This was my dad. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who walked me down the aisle, who always told me I could do anything. I walked to his bedside and gently took his hand. It felt cool and limp in mine. "Hey, Dad," I whispered, my voice thick with tears I could no longer hold back. "It's Carol. I'm here. You just need to fight, okay? You just fight." I stood there for a few minutes, just holding his hand, the beeping of the heart monitor the only sound in the room. I was there for him. Not for them. And in that moment, that was all that mattered. After seeing my father, I stepped back out into the waiting room, feeling emotionally drained. Susan was on the phone in the hallway, her voice a low murmur. My mother was sitting alone, staring into space. When she saw me, she looked up, her eyes pleading. Can we talk, Carol?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Just for a minute?" I didn't want to. I wanted to grab my purse and go home to my quiet, safe house. But I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw a broken woman. So, I nodded and sat in the chair Susan had vacated, leaving a careful foot of space between us. For a moment, she just wrung her hands in her lap. Then, she took a shuddering breath. "I have been a fool," she began, her voice barely audible. "A blind, stubborn, prideful fool." She looked at me, and tears started to stream down her wrinkled cheeks. "Watching your father in that bed, everything becomes so clear. All the things that seemed so important, keeping up appearances, avoiding conflict, it's all just nonsense." I remained silent, letting her speak. This wasn't a conversation. It was a confession. "I was so wrong," she sobbed, her body shaking. "When you called me that night, I should have dropped everything and come to you. I should have held you. I should have been your mother. Instead, I chose to protect a lie. I was so afraid of the family falling apart that I helped hammer the nails into its coffin." She took another shaky breath. "And for what? So Susan wouldn't have to face the consequences of her actions? So Rick wouldn't look bad in front of his partners? It was all about them. It was never about you." She then told me something that shocked me to my core. "It's not what you think, with them," she said, lowering her voice. "Susan and Rick. They're not happy. It's a disaster. All they do is fight. He's resentful that he lost his comfortable life, that his divorce is costing him a fortune. His promotion at work was put on hold because of the scandal. And Susan, she thought she was getting your life, but she just got your leftovers. He called her by your name last week, Carol. By accident. She told me she didn't speak to him for 2 days. Their little fantasy fell apart the second it became real. The information didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. It just made me feel tired. It was all such a pathetic, sordid mess. I see it now, my mother continued, her voice filled with a desperate urgency. I see how I failed you. How we all failed you. Your father, he's been sick with worry and guilt over this. I think this is what put him in that bed. We broke his heart, and then his heart broke. She reached out then, her hand trembling, and put it on my arm. Her touch was hesitant, uncertain. I know I don't deserve it, she whispered, her eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness. I know I have no right to ask. But please, Carol. Can you ever forgive me? I've lost one daughter to her own selfishness. I can't bear the thought of losing the other one to my stupidity. Please, come home. I stood there, her words hanging in the sterile air of the hospital waiting room. Her desperate plea to come home. My father was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life, possibly because of the stress of this very situation. My mother, the woman who had betrayed me so deeply, was now begging for my forgiveness. And I had a choice to make. A choice that felt impossibly heavy. I stood there, looking at my mother, this woman who had caused me so much pain, whose face was now a testament to her own regret. Her plea to come home echoed in the quiet waiting room. But where was home, really? The house I grew up in, the one she was referring to, no longer felt like it. My home was the one I was building with Heather, a place of safety and honesty. What do you do in a moment like that? Your father is in the ICU. Your mother is begging for a forgiveness you're not sure you have to give. Do you let her back in? Do you slam the door shut forever? Do you choose duty to a parent over loyalty to yourself? I was at the biggest crossroads of my life, and I had no idea which way to turn. I'm going to pause my story right here for a second. Because I need to know I'm not alone in this. If you are still listening, please do me a favor and like this video, and then comment with the number 1 down below. It lets me know that you've given me a thumbs up, and it helps me know that you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you can possibly imagine. So please, comment with the number 1, and then let me tell you what I decided. Thank you. Seeing your support means the world to me. Okay, let me tell you what happened next. I took a deep breath and gently removed my mother's hand from my arm. I looked her straight in the eye, not with anger, but with a calm resolve I didn't know I possessed. I will be here for Dad, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I will come to the hospital. I will help with his care. I will do whatever is necessary for him. Because he is my father. A flicker of hope sparked in her eyes. I had to extinguish it before it grew. But you need to understand something, I continued. This does not fix what happened. This does not erase the last 6 months. My home is with my daughter now. The old family, the one you're asking me to come back to? It doesn't exist anymore. It died the night you chose to protect them instead of me. Her face fell, but I pressed on. I had to be crystal clear. There could be no more ambiguity, no more room for misunderstanding. I can, in time, perhaps forgive you for your weakness, Mom. I can try to understand that you were scared and made a terrible, terrible mistake. We can try to build something new, a new kind of relationship. But it will have rules. It will have boundaries. Anything, she whispered. Anything, Carol. Rule number 1, I said, holding up a finger. We will never speak of Susan or Rick again. Ever. I do not want to hear their names. I do not want updates on their miserable lives. As far as I am concerned, they are strangers. If Susan is here when I am here, I will be civil for Dad's sake, but we will not speak. Do you understand? She nodded numbly. Rule number 2. My relationship with you will be on my terms. I will decide when I am ready to talk, when I am ready to visit. You will not pressure me. You will not guilt-trip me. You will not show up at my house unannounced. You will respect my space and the peace I have fought so hard to build for myself and my daughter. I paused, letting the words sink in. And that's it. That's the deal. I am willing to be your daughter again, but not the one you knew. Not the doormat. I am here for Dad. Any relationship beyond that depends entirely on your ability to respect my boundaries. Can you do that? For the first time, she looked at me not as her child, but as an equal. As a woman who had drawn a line in the sand. And she knew I meant it. Yes, she said, her voice choked with tears, but her eyes clear with understanding. Yes, Carol. I can do that. It wasn't a heartwarming reunion. There were no hugs. But it was something more important. It was an honest beginning. It was the first brick in a new foundation, one built not on obligation or fantasy, but on the hard, cold truth. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. My father's recovery was slow but steady. He came home from the hospital looking older and more vulnerable, but he was alive. True to my word, I was there. I helped my mother manage his medications, I cooked meals and brought them over, and I sat with him, talking about neutral things like the weather and baseball. My interactions with my mother were polite and functional. We talked about Dad's health, about groceries, about doctor's appointments. There were no deep, emotional conversations. The massive wound between us was still there, but we were carefully, cautiously, building a fragile bridge over it. She respected my rules. She never mentioned Susan or Rick. I saw Susan a few times at my parents' house. It was just as awkward and cold as I had imagined. We give each other a tight, meaningless nod of acknowledgement and then proceed to ignore each other completely. The sister I had loved was a ghost, a phantom in a house full of painful memories. I felt no anger towards her anymore, just a profound and empty sadness for what we had lost. Meanwhile, my divorce from Rick was finalized. Thanks to Ms. Davis, the settlement was more than fair. I got the house, full custody of Heather, and enough financial support to ensure that her college fund was secure and that I wouldn't have to worry. Rick and Susan moved into a small condo across town. I heard through the grapevine that his career had stalled and that they were struggling financially. I felt nothing. Their life was no longer my concern. The most beautiful thing that came out of all this ugliness was my relationship with Heather. We were closer than ever. We were a team. We had faced the worst life could throw at us, and we had not only survived, but we were thriving. Our little yellow living room became the heart of our new life, a place filled with laughter, movie nights, and conversations that lasted late into the night. One sunny afternoon a few months later, Heather and I were walking on the beach. The sun was warm on our faces, and the sound of the waves was a peaceful, constant rhythm. She was telling me about her plans to try out for the school play, her face animated with excitement. I looked at her, my smart, resilient, beautiful daughter, and my heart felt full to bursting. I had thought my life was over that day I sat in my kitchen, staring at that iPad. I thought I had lost everything. But I was wrong. I had lost a life that was built on lies. And in its place, I had built a smaller, quieter, but infinitely more real and beautiful life. It wasn't a postcard perfect family anymore. It was something better. It was genuine. It was strong. It was ours. And as I stood there, with the salty wind in my hair and my daughter's hand in mine, I knew, with a certainty that reached down into my soul, that the sun was finally rising on a new day. Thank you all for listening to my story. It means so much to me to be able to share it. If you've been through something similar, or if any part of this resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. It's good to know we're not alone. And please, take care of yourselves.